In the last episode, I talked about in order to develop a highly effective pastoral staff, you need to be the cultural architect of your staff's productivity culture. But the question is how exactly do you go about being the architect of a culture? Or if you are already in a situation, how do you take a culture from where it is to where you want it to be, where you think God is leading you, the direction that He's wanting to take things? How do you do that? Well, in today's episode, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the levers that are at your disposal to pull in order to change a culture from where it is to where you feel like God is leading it to, or how you can take those levers, pull them in order to create a culture out of nothing. That's what we're going to talk about today in this episode. So let's get started. So the big question is this: how do pastors like us who remain focused on the mission of Jesus and serving our communities without being distracted by everything in the world around us, how do we increase our effectiveness while living a lifestyle that doesn't compromise our health, our families, or our personal relationships with Jesus? That's the question this podcast is going to answer. I'm Dr. Brandon Party Cooper, and welcome to the Ministry Hackers Podcast. Welcome to this episode of the Ministry Hackers Podcast. I'm so glad that you're here with me. So glad you're taking time out of your day to hang out here on the podcast. It's such a pleasure to serve you and to serve pastors all around the country, doing exactly what God has called them to do, to serve people, build churches, build ministries, reach communities, and at the same time, love their families, spend time with them, have hobbies, have vacations, have downtime, have things that they enjoy that make their life more fulfilling outside of ministry. I love doing it. It's a great opportunity that I have, that God has given me to work with you and so many pastors around the country. And I thank you for the opportunity and just pray that God is moving in you and through you and making a difference in your corner of the world. So we have a lot to talk about today, so I want to get to it. But before I do, I want to remind you that if you are sitting with a website that you're not very happy with, your website exists out there in the World Wide Web, but it doesn't really work for you. It's not really doing anything for you. It's not generating people coming to church on a Sunday morning. It's not answering the questions they need so that they will come and visit. If that's not happening, then I want to invite you to get my 30-day website cheat sheet that's going to walk you step by step through how to build a website in 30 days. And it's not just a website that exists, it's a website that works, a website that does work for you while you walk away and do other ministry with people. In 30 days, you can do it. It'll take you step by step. And so all you have to do is go to brandonpartycooper.com/30-day website. That's brandonpartycooper.com/30-day website. You go there and you will find the cheat sheet that you can download. Download it, walk step by step. You can start today. Download it today. You can start today. And in 30 days, your website will be up, running, and working for you, bringing people to you every Sunday morning, bringing new guests, answering their questions, making a difference, and changing lives exactly like it should be. So again, go to brandonpartycooper.com/30-day website and get your cheat sheet today. Okay, so in the last episode, I talked about how to be the cultural architect of your team in order to have a highly effective ministry team, particularly a pastoral staff team or a team that directly reports back to you. You have to own your role as the pastor to be the cultural architect of that team. However, the question is, well, how do you actually become the cultural architect? How do you own that role? How do you step into designing a culture within not just your church, but within your pastoral staff team or your team that's directly related to you, closely answering to you? How do you do that? And what I want to do today is I want to give you the levers that are at your disposal, things that you can do every day that will design the culture that you want. Design the culture that you enjoy working within, design the culture that gets a lot done, the culture that is effective for doing ministry and reaching your community. Because here's one reality that we all have to face, is that a lot of times we'll go to a conference and we'll learn what this pastor's doing or this church is doing, and we'll try to take that and we will implement it into our location and our place and our setting, and then it doesn't work. Well, leadership is a lot of the same way. Sometimes we will read a leadership book, or we'll read a ministry book, and we'll see what this pastor's doing or that pastor's doing, and we'll try to implement that. But the problem is that sometimes those things are anecdotal. They work there, but not here. They work in that part of the country, but not in this part of the country. They work in that setting, but not in my setting. And so what happens is we get frustrated with trying to figure out what things we need to implement in order to do whatever it is we're wanting to do, particularly in leadership, lead the way we want to. And so what I want to do is I'm going to go outside of anecdotal, and I want to get down to levers that you can pull. These are things that are at your disposal. They're not predefined. They're just levers. And what you have to do is decide, how do I want these levers to work for me? And I'm not just, I'm pulling this from a book called Organizational Culture and Leadership. It's by Edgar Schein, and it's a book that's been out for several years. It's a cornerstone of leadership across the board, particularly from an academic, professional standpoint. Edgar has done tons of research on organizational cultures, tons of research on how leadership and organizational culture work and operate. And what he has given is these levers that are at the disposal of every leader that we can pull. You and I can just pull these levers and create the culture that we're looking for. And so think about, if you're familiar with a soundboard. A soundboard has several different sliders on it. And what you do is you move the sliders according to, I want a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I want less of this and more of that. And you just kind of fiddle with these sliders to get the sound that you're looking for. Well, these are the same way. These levers are the same way. You move them slightly one way or the other, depending on you, depending on your leadership, depending on your style, depending on the culture that you're wanting to build, depending on your location. Your community may be a certain type of community. Let's say you are in a highly affluent culture and or community, and you need to create a church culture and a pastoral staff culture that reflects that highly affluent culture. And that doesn't mean that you need to pay your staff more, though that may be part of the question. But it's more about, do they have the mindset or the attitude or the understanding to operate in a way that works for that culture? For me, I live in a highly military culture. And so the question is does the church, does the staff in this area, do they operate with the military community in mind? Because if they don't, then they're going to have a hard time reaching that community. And so what we have to do as pastors is we have to figure out, how do I want to move these levers that are going to create the pastoral staff culture that I'm looking for, so that we operate in a way that reaches our community and is effective, gets a lot done in a short amount of time, but then also values what the community around me values. And so what I want to do is I want to just go through these levers, and you can pick and choose the ones that you want to use and how you want to use them. And so again, this is pulled from Edgar Schein's book, Organizational Culture and Leadership. You can find that pretty much anywhere. It's a wonderful book. I would recommend reading it for all kinds of understanding on how to build, design, develop, and change culture wherever you are. And so the first mechanism, or the first lever that you can pull, is what you pay attention to and what you measure on a regular basis. What you pay attention to and measure on a regular basis. Now, all of us, we pay attention and measure certain things. Even those of us who are not data people. We don't really care about the spreadsheet. We don't really care about numbers. There's only a couple numbers that we really look at. Well, if that's the case, then you're communicating to your pastoral staff exactly what you value. So if you're saying, you know what, I'm really just worried about how many are on Sunday morning, the number of worshipers on Sunday morning, and I'm really just worried about the bottom line of the budget. Well, what you're communicating to your team is that they are to do whatever they can to raise the number of worshipers on a Sunday morning, and they need to do whatever they need to keep that budget line, whether it's their budget or another budget within the church, up in the black. That's really all the expectation that you're communicating is, I want this and I want that. And then let's go another step beyond that. What are you paying attention to? Are you paying attention to Are you paying attention to how clean the bathrooms are? Is that a real big thing that you're paying attention to? Or are you really paying attention to the sound level in the sanctuary? Or are you paying attention to how clean your campus looks, the grounds, and all that? What you communicate to your team based on what you value or what you're paying attention to and what you measure will communicate to your team how they should respond. So if you're saying that, this and this and this is what I'm really concerned about, and you may not even verbally be saying that, but it's what you're paying attention and focusing on and what you're measuring, then what that tells your team is that then I don't really have to worry about this, this, and this, because these are the things that pastor's really worried about. These are the things that really matter to him. And so I'm going to focus on those and not worry about these. And really, it's not a question of what's right or what's wrong. If really all you're worried about is Sunday morning attendance and your bottom line budget, there's no right or wrong in that. But my question is that really all you're concerned about? If that's not really what all you're concerned about, then you need to figure out a way to pay attention, or at least communicate the things that you're paying attention to beyond those two things, and communicate your measurements. So, if you're, let's say, what you only talk about is Sunday morning attendance or the bottom line of the budget, but what you're really worried about, what you really are concerned about, are the number of baptisms that occur in your church every year, but you don't really talk about that, then you need to talk about that more. You need to build ministries or turn the ministry focus towards that, or create systems that operate and function towards getting more people in baptisms. Again, this isn't a right or wrong thing. It's a question of, is what you're communicating to your team in alignment with what you actually are concerned and worried about? Because whatever it is you are concerned and worried about, if it's not being communicated, then your team is going to have a gap from what your expectations are to what they're actually focused and performing on. And so communicate clearly and communicate consistently what you're focused on and what you're measuring, so your team can be on the same page with you and making sure that they're valuing the things that you actually value as the pastor. Okay, so that's the first one. So the second lever is how you react to critical incidents and organizational crisis. Now, we've all been through a very challenging time over these last couple of years. But if you can with me, just take a moment and think back. When all the shutdowns happened, how did you respond? How did you react to that? Did you complain about the restrictions, or did you complain about things being shut down? Or did you take the attitude and the mentality, okay, these are the cards that were dealt, and so I'm going to roll with them and figure it out? Or maybe you were somewhere in between. Again, this isn't a right or wrong. I'm not saying this is how you should react or how you shouldn't react. But how you react in those moments of crisis, how you react in critical incidents, how you react communicates to your team. So if you want a team that is calm and collected, that rolls with the punches and is relaxed when things don't go as planned, that respond quickly when details are missed, if that's the team you want, then you have to pay attention to how you're reacting in those moments as well. If you become frantic and you become overwhelmed and you start barking out orders and yelling at people, well, that's going to infuse into your culture a panic, an uncertainty, a lack of trust. Those are things you're infusing into your culture. Whereas at the same time, if you have a very chill attitude and you are almost like it doesn't really matter attitude, well, that's also going to infuse certain things into your culture as well. Your pastoral staff may feel like, well, if I miss a detail, it doesn't really matter because pastor doesn't care. So again, it's about figuring out the consistency. What exactly do you want your team to do? How do you want them to react? Because how you react will trickle down and will speak to them on how they should be and what they should do. And so paying attention to how you react in critical incidents and organizational crisis. So that's the second one. The third one is how you allocate resources. Now, this is a touchy one. And if you have a staff of two or more, so if it's you and three other people plus, then this becomes really touchy because everybody has their own budgets. Everybody has different things that they're sharing throughout the church, different resources. And so the question is how are you as the pastor, how are you allocating those resources? Because if you're saying that, man, I really value kids ministry. I really think that kids ministry is huge. That's important. That's a valuable part of who we are as a church. But your kids ministry is getting 5% of the budget and the youth ministry is getting 20% of the budget. Well, the question is do you really value the kids ministry as much as you're saying you are? Because for the pastors, that creates a uncertainty and a distrust, because the kids pastor's looking at it and saying, you say that you value us, but I am not seeing that in what you're allocating the resources towards. Or if you say, hey, I really value our family ministries, our kids and our youth. I really value those. I think they're super important, but a large percentage of your budget is going to outreach events or going towards, internal small group systems. If that's the case, then what you're communicating is inconsistent with what you're actually doing. And it doesn't have to just be money. It could be volunteers, how you're funneling volunteers. If every person that comes to you that you feel like is going to be a great volunteer and you funnel them into the small group system, well, then your kids and youth are going to ask the question, okay, wait a second. We are dying over here. We need volunteers, and everybody that comes to you, you're sending to the small group system. Well, where are we supposed to get volunteers? And then they have to fight over the handful of people that are available. So again, it's a question of how are you communicating? What are you communicating? And is it consistent with what you're actually doing? Bringing your actions into alignment with what your communication is. And also making sure that what you truly value is being communicated clearly. Because maybe you do. Maybe you feel like kids ministry is the most vital ministry in your church. But for whatever reason, you're just not resourcing them. Well, that's time to reevaluate that and figure out either, do I value kids as much as I say I do? Or if I really do, then how am I going to allocate the proper resources in that direction? Here's the thing. It doesn't have to be fair. And I think that most pastors understand that, especially those who've been around a while. They understand it's not about being fair. So if I'm the youth pastor and my budget is less than the kids ministry, I'm not expecting it necessarily to be the same, but I am expecting you as my pastor to communicate that clearly and help me understand, where do I fit in the scheme of things, in the plan of this church and the direction you're leading us. How do I fit in as the youth pastor? How does my ministry fit into the plan of reaching this community? And if it's second or third or fourth or fifth on the list, that's okay. I just need to know that and make sure that it's consistent and clear and my expectations are managed from what you're saying and what you're doing. If you do that, even if you come to me and say, you know what, Brandon, I appreciate what you're doing in youth ministry, but according to our plan to reach this community, youth ministry is about fourth on the priority list. It doesn't mean I don't value youth ministry. It just means that the strategy that we have to reach this community, youth ministry is just fourth on that priority. And so the resources you're getting are going to be lower than these three other ministries. Well, at least I know the reality and I can operate from that. But if you're telling me youth ministry is super important, it's vital to our strategy to reach this community. But then when I look at it, I'm like, I'm struggling with volunteers. I'm struggling with finances. I'm struggling with dates on the calendar. I'm struggling, and you're telling me I'm important, but it doesn't feel like that. So again, it really comes down to communication and how you're functioning and operating with pulling these levers and helping me understand that what you're communicating is important is actually where the resources are going. So that's the third one. The fourth one is how you model, teach, and coach. Now, this is huge because all of us have certain styles about how we preach, how we teach, how we coach individuals, how we develop people. If we say that we value the development of people, particularly if we're saying this to our pastoral staff. So I'm the lead pastor and I'm saying, you know what, team, I value the development of leaders around me. But then when I look at the calendar, I'm spending almost no time developing my staff. Your staff is going to feel like there's an inconsistency with that. And it's not only about how often it's happening, but it's also the quality. So if you're spending, I don't know, if you're spending a 10-minute devotional with your team and that's all the teaching and development that they're getting, but then you're turning around and you're spending a whole weekend with your top level leaders or your board or whoever it is, then you're communicating to your pastoral staff that they are just not as valuable to you as these other groups of people. And it's also in the approach that you have. It's not about necessarily just the content, but it's the approach. Are you presenting in such a way that is loving and caring? Are you presenting in a way that is direct and is it direct and matter of fact? Are you approaching it in such a way that is almost condemning or guilt-ridden? How are you approaching these moments of teaching and coaching and preaching? If you're approaching them in, let's say, a very compassionate, I just love you and want the best for you approach, what you may be doing is instilling into your culture, particularly in your pastoral staff culture, that the relationship you have is the most valuable part of their existence on that team. At the same time, if you're coming at it and you're teaching and coaching from a standpoint of it's very matter of fact and it's very focused and almost a little more business-like, well, then what you're communicating is that their performance on the team takes precedent over relationship. And again, I'm not saying one way or the other how it should be. I'm just saying you need to be aware as the pastor and as the leader, you need to be aware of how am I teaching, how am I coaching, how am I preaching, how am I developing people, how am I communicating, how am I doing that, and what is that infusing into the culture of my pastoral staff and my team? What exactly am I communicating that is developing and designing and growing this culture around us? Okay, so we have two left, two levers that you can pull to change or build or create the culture that you're looking for on your pastoral staff team. Okay, so number 5 is how you recognize rewards and status. How you recognize rewards and status. Are you rewarding your team for the things they do? Are you rewarding them for their performance? When everybody comes into staff, are you making a side comment because the worship pastor is always 5 minutes late? And so, everybody's there and everybody's, coming in and getting settled, and, the meeting starts at 9:00 and your worship pastor meanders in at 9:05. Are you making a kind of a side comment? Oh, so glad you can make it. Or even if it's joking, what you're doing is you're communicating that you value promptness. You value everybody being on time in your little joking side comment. Now, the problem is that too many of us as pastors, we are passive aggressive in our leadership. And so we do way too many of those. We do a lot of side comments or underhanded compliments or things like that. And what it does is it creates this uncertainty about what you actually value. Are you valuing promptness and so you're giving your worship pastor a hard time, or are you valuing relationship and you're just joking around with them? And usually it's because we're not communicating clearly what our expectations are. And so when we have these side comments or these underhanded compliments or whatever, it creates confusion. So what are you rewarding? What are you championing people on? Are you celebrating the number of volunteers that are in the kids ministry, or are you celebrating the number of students who showed up at a youth lock-in? Are you cheering on the number of baptisms that happened last year, or are you cheering on the number of people who came to the Easter egg hunt? What exactly are you rewarding? And that's just talking about the things that you're celebrating. What are you actually rewarding? Are you, when you're talking about your salary increases, how are you? What's that based off of? And are you communicating that? Are you communicating, is it the number of people who are coming into individual ministries? Are you giving the youth pastor a raise because he grew by, the youth ministry grew by 50 people last year? Or are you giving the worship pastor a raise because he's grown his worship team out by 10 people last year. What exactly are you rewarding? And if you are going as far as actually having rewards, some of you, some of us as pastors, what we do is we actually have award nights or ceremonies, or we give something for somebody who's been here for 5 years at my church. Well, if you're doing that, then what you're doing is you're communicating that you value longevity. You value people who are at your church long term. What is it that you are rewarding, and what is it that you are celebrating with your team? And then this also goes to status. When you're in a meeting and the kids pastor says something and the youth pastor says something, do you side with the youth pastor 9 times out of 10? Because what you're communicating is that somehow, some way, you are seeing that position at a higher level than the kids pastor. Or do you value the executive pastor or the associate pastor? Do you value their position more than you value the small groups pastor? How are you communicating value by what you reward and the statuses that you place on people and on things? Are you saying that small groups are more important because you champion them from the stage on a Sunday morning more often than say the men's ministry group? Again, and I'm not saying which one should be valued and which one shouldn't be more than the other. Quite honestly, I think what determines that is, what is God calling you as a church to do? You as the pastor, how is God speaking to you about the strategic plan you have to reach your community? And that in itself determines what takes priority and what doesn't. And then it's just about consistently rewarding that and recognizing the champion, or recognizing the victories and the moments of accomplishment, so that you can recognize and build into the culture, hey, this is who we are and this is what we're about. And this is how we get there, and this is what we want to do in order to reach the goals that we believe God has given us. And then the last one, and this one's a hard one: how you recruit, hire, promote, and fire your staff members. How you recruit, hire, promote, and fire your staff members. Now, some of us pastors, we have very extensive processes for each one of these. And I don't know what your process looks like at your church. Maybe you have a very clear hiring process, but a very muddy firing process. Or, maybe you're very clear on how you recruit people onto your team, but promotion is kind of willy-nilly and all over the place. What is that communicating? How does that create understanding within your culture? I've been on pastoral staff teams where you have one person on the staff who is high performing. They are very good at ministry, very charismatic. They naturally draw people to them. And I've watched them move through the ranks in the church, up to an executive, associate, or even campus pastor situation, move all the way through that based really solely on just charisma. They aren't high performing as far as they get a lot done. They're high performing in the sense that they bring in a lot of people. When they throw an event, it's kind of haphazard and the details get missed and everything's a disaster. But because of their charisma, they're able to step in and smooth it over, and nobody that attends the event knows that there was really any issues. But everybody on the back end, their team and the rest of the church staff, they're all in shambles because they had to step up in the last minute and fix problems. But they get rewarded in promotion because of the results they bring in. And that's fine. Again, if that's how you're measuring and valuing, if it's all about the results and not about the process that it takes to get there, then that's fine. At the same time, I've seen great pastors and leaders not get hired onto a team simply because they didn't have high charisma, or maybe they didn't present themselves very well in an interview, but on paper they're really good, and so they can't seem to get hired onto a staff just because they can't get past that interview. And so one of the things I do is I try to coach pastors on how to interview well, because they can look great on paper, but not so much in the interview. But how you interview and how you go through the hiring process communicates what your pastoral staff is, the culture that they're coming onto. The hardest one is firing. Do you have a process to let someone go from your pastoral staff? Or is it just one day they're here and the next day they're gone? I've seen pastors and staffs where one of the staff members just doesn't agree with the pastor. They're not doing anything wrong. They're not being subversive. They're not, doing anything that's really out of bounds. The pastor just doesn't like the fact that they disagree with him. And, and that pastoral staff gets let go simply because there's a disconnect between their personalities. And maybe you're the type of person that says, yeah, I think that's huge and that's valuable. And that's fine. But I think what really happens, though, is the rest of your pastoral staff says, oh, well, I can't disagree with pastor because he might just fire me. And I can't have that. Like, I have a family and I love what I do. And I have my students or my, my small groups or whatever it is you're over. And the rest of the staff says, no, I'm not going to disagree with pastor because I can't afford to lose my job. The question is how are you approaching this? Pastor, how are you hiring and firing? How are you promoting? How are you recruiting? Because whatever you're doing, whether it's intentional or not, whatever you're doing is communicating to your team and infusing into the culture of your pastoral staff a reality. And I always say that you as the pastor are the cultural architect of your team. Now, it's either by your intentional behavior and actions or by your passive behavior and actions. If you are passive in your actions and behavior, then it creates a little bit of a vacuum and somebody else is creating your culture for you and not you. And if you're being intentional, are you being intentional in the right way? Is what you really value, is it being communicated clearly and is it coming out in your culture? Because here's the thing. If you've had your team 3 to 5 years, the culture of that team should be where you want it to be. If you've just inherited your team, well, no, there's going to take time to either transition people in and out or to retrain and develop the culture that you're wanting. But if you've been there 3 to 5 years and you're looking around your pastoral staff and your culture is all over the place and it doesn't make sense and you don't like it, it's not clicking how you want it, then you need to look back at these levers and ask the question, where am I missing it? What am I doing wrong? Or how am I not pulling these levers properly? Usually it's about an inconsistency with communication and actions and behaviors. And sometimes it's my actions and behaviors, I think, are creating this, but what they're actually doing is creating this. And so I need to tweak them or communicate differently in order to get to where I want to be. Again, you're the pastor, so you are the cultural architect, whether you like that or not. You're the architect of your culture. The benefit of that, and what I love about that as a leader, is that if I'm the architect, then yes, all that responsibility is on me, but I get to create the team that I love to work with. I get to create the team that performs at a high level, but then also I like to hang out with. I'm going to spend most of my time at the office in ministry doing things with these people. I want to spend time with them. I want to enjoy times with them. And when you're talking about doing a staff retreat and things like that, those become highlights of your ministry just because you've built a team that you love being around, that reflects the culture that you're wanting. And that's what we want to get to. That's what you as a pastor should be striving towards. When you say, hey, I want to live this dream life in ministry that you talk about all the time, this is a vital part. Not only do you need to develop a highly effective team, but you need to create a culture that you all exist within. And when that culture is where you want it to be and functioning the way you want it to, man, it's so much fun. It's what ministry should be. So if you're looking around you and you're saying, this is rough, like my ministry or my team is disconnected from me, I'm not getting the performance that I want out of them, I feel like things are all over the place, then it's time to take a step back and evaluate your culture and what is happening in these different levers. How are you either not pulling them or pulling them in the wrong way? How is your communication inconsistent with what your actions are saying? What is going on that you need to do and change to create the culture that you love working in, that your team loves being a part of, and that ministry is happening at a high level, lives are being changed, communities are being reached, and everything is clicking the way you want it to. Because it's possible and it's fun when you get there. And so I want to encourage you, don't be frustrated and don't give up, but just ask yourself, how can I pull these levers differently in order to get to where I want to be with the culture of my team and spending time doing ministry with people that I love being around and who are doing it at a high level. That's the goal. All right. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next episode.